Hello everyone and welcome. Thank you for joining. Where in this video we're taking a look at rocket launchers again. Now in my first video covering this weapon type, there were a couple of legendaries missed out. That was simply due to me not having them to test, and I still don't. So I want to take a moment to say a monumental thank you to a regular on the channel, Triple Moon Panda, who went out of their way and recorded clips damaging Carl and also firing at a wall, all while ensuring the same standards were met as all other videos, that being only one loader mod, nothing to boost reserves and a major spec mod. So again, a huge thank you to Panda, as this video wouldn't have been possible without their help. So we'll be looking at Royal Entry with Quick Launch, Impact Casing, Threat Detector and Clown Cartridge. Of course, in that third column, Impulse Amplifier or Field Prep would be preferred, but beggars can't be choosers, and Threat Detector can increase reload speed when enemies are nearby, although that hasn't been counted for testing in this video. Clown Cartridge always gives 2 in the mag after reloading, so Panda very kindly sent over footage of starting with 1 in the first mag, but then also 2. So we'll take a look at both of those. Then it will be Deathbringer. This is something I did have myself, and there's an awful lot to talk about with this weapon regarding its DPS, which will be discussed more when we get to the graph. And finally it's Sleepless, the Dreaming City rocket launcher recently reintroduced. This has been tested with the perks Quick Launch, Alloy Casing, Tracking Module and Vorpal Weapon. Now no impact casing, but alloy casing will dramatically increase reload, so it will help with DPS when not stood in a lunar well or rift, for example. And of course, Field Prep would be better in the third column, but we do have Vorpal Weapon, which is the main perk to have. Once we've looked at those 3, there'll be a table ranking them in order of DPS, highest to lowest, and I'll also be including every weapon tested in my last rocket launcher video. After the table, it will be the graph, and we'll start with just these 3, or 4, as Royal Entry has been tested twice, and then I'll add some of the other options from my last video onto the graph as well. As already mentioned, a single loader mod was used, nothing to boost reserves, and the legendaries had a major spec mod. So first up, Royal Entry. With impact casing, impact damage came in at 18,824, while blast damage was 59,963. Therefore each round is 78,787. With 7 rounds in reserves and nothing to boost that, total damage was 551,509. Timers were measured in the same location as my first rocket launcher video, and travel time has been taken into consideration. For the examples shown on screen, you can see Clown Cartridge provides 2 in the mag, but for this clip, it was with only 1 round in the first mag. Total time to fire all 7 came in at 15.02 seconds, therefore DPS is only 36,718. Now, for the same weapon and perk combinations but starting with 2 in the mag, damage of course doesn't change, but neither should the time. It takes the same number of reloads to fire 7 rounds, which is because when you start with 1 in the first mag, you end with 2 in the last mag. But when you start with 2, you end with 1. The time is actually slightly different, coming in at 15.32 seconds, so DPS with total damage at 551,509 is 35,999. But this difference in time is just down to small inconsistencies when reloading, which is something I have mentioned in previous videos, and I'll talk a little more about with the graph. Next up is Deathbringer. This actually has the potential to be incredible for DPS and the best of all rocket launchers, but its inconsistency ruins that. The numbers against Carl will be very specific, meaning when using this for yourself, you'll probably be doing less or even more damage per round and DPS. For anyone who doesn't know, the idea behind this is that you fire above the target and the orbs that fall after the round detonates are what do the damage, but the further they fall, the more damage they do. I haven't tested the increase or decrease in damage based on the distance, as I feel that would be a whole video just in itself. Now you can either hold down the fire button and release when it's above the target, which will detonate the round, or just fire against a solid surface. So when the single round detonates, 7 orbs are created. They slowly fall down and will track any target they get close to. For testing against Carl, I've kept him in the middle of this open space and fired directly at the ceiling above him. Upon impact, each orb does 22,134 damage from this height, which means for 7, each round has the potential to do 154,938 damage, which is a lot, and could possibly be even higher if the orbs have further to fall. This means for 7 rounds, total damage is 1,084,566, so over 1 million damage for just 7 rounds. On-screen damage was only 6 orbs, and I think that's because one detonated early due to impacting against the ceiling. As I've said, inconsistent. For timings, I've stood in roughly the same place, fired at roughly the same spot on the ceiling, and then timed how long it takes for the orbs to fall and impact the ground. This presented a problem though, where that I had to aim up and fire as they impacted, meaning I couldn't time the exact moment of damage accurately other than on the final round. So time for this came in at around 22.45 seconds, which would make DPS 48,310, but the orbs impact faster when travelling straight down. Compared to against Carl, where the ones that are further away will turn 45 degrees when tracking, as demonstrated on screen now, with Carl on the left and no Carl on the right. You can see all orbs have impacted when just travelling straight down, whereas there are still 3 left that are yet to hit Carl. This means it can take a little longer when tracking a target, unless it's a really big target and this effect won't be as pronounced. Despite that, I'm going to use the time it takes for them all to impact and damage Carl, which takes the total time up to 23.25 seconds, a difference of 0.8. And DPS comes down then to 46,648, which is actually still very good and makes it the best rocket launcher I've ever tested so far. Now, as I've said, there is much more to talk about with this weapon, but I'm saving it for when we're looking at the graph. And finally, it's Sleepless. With Vorpal Weapon, this does 19,679 impact damage and 68,958 blast damage, meaning total damage per round is 88,637. As expected, this can hold 7 in reserves, therefore total damage comes in at 620,459. For timings, remember this has alloy casing, not impact casing, so the reload time will be relatively quick with the single loader mod equipped too. Total time to fire those 7 rounds, including that short travel time, was 17.78 seconds. This means DPS is 34,896, the lowest in this test. Coming onto the screen now is a table ranking the DPS of all rocket launchers that I've tested this season, with the specific examples from this video highlighted in red. Pause the video if you want a little more time to look at this as we're moving on to the graph. So sticking to the order tested, first up it's Royal Entry starting with 1 round in the first mag, closely followed by the same weapon but starting with 2 in the first mag. So it's clear that starting with 2 in the mag is better. There are plenty of moments where both have done the same damage, but for any points where it's not equal damage, then starting with 2 is ahead. Now the timings, and therefore the graph, show starting with 2 in the mag has taken longer to fire all 7 rounds, but as I've already said, this will be slight inconsistencies in the reload. It's something I've personally noticed before, and if we were to test this 10 times for each, giving us a larger sample size, I'm fairly confident in saying that they'd average almost exactly the same time. And the reason they would be the same is because it takes 3 reloads to fire 7 rounds for both examples. The only difference being, as I've already said, for the first example you start with 1 round in the first mag and then with 2 in the final mag, and for the second example you start with 2 in the first mag and end with 1 in the last mag. Consider these two the same DPS after 7 rounds, but for anything less, starting with 2 in the opening magazine is better. Okay, so now it's Deathbringer. And just look at that damage, over 1 million for 7 rounds. But a very long delay of just over 5 seconds from the moment of firing, so the orbs even starting to do damage against Carl. More on this in a moment though. And now the final weapon on this graph, Sleepless. The overall DPS number was quite low, but when you actually see it on the graph, it's more than capable of holding its own against the Royal Entry examples. There are a few moments where it's ahead of both, moments where it's behind both, and also moments where it's sitting in the middle. You can see it does more total damage, and the only reason its DPS is lower is because of that last round. Just for those that are interested, the moment you fire the 6th round, so that's here on the graph, DPS up to that point is 35,645, which although isn't much higher, it still puts it a little closer to both Royal Entries tested. So, some thoughts on Deathbringer. First, let's assume you can time the first round from this perfectly, and have the orbs damage a boss almost as soon as they might enter a damage phase. Currently, it's taken 5.22 seconds after firing for them to damage Carl, but if we take 5 seconds off, this is how it looks on the graph. This means total time would be 18.25 seconds, and therefore DPS 59,428, which is near as damn it exactly the same as the Lament. So what's the problem? Well, first off, the orbs do their own thing and will track any target, so not everyone might go where you want it, i.e. a boss, if there are ads nearby. Secondly, with no solid surface above a target, it's unlikely you'll release the fire button at exactly the same time every time, introducing further inconsistencies in damage and time. If you fire too high, the orbs may disappear before reaching anything below. Fire too low, and you won't do as much damage. Release the trigger too soon or too late, and some may not even find their way to your desired enemy because the round has detonated too far away. Thirdly, if you do have a solid surface to fire against, then an orb or two may pre-detonate before it even begins to fall, which can be seen in the clips when demonstrating damage against Carl, as only 6 fall and make contact with him. Fourthly, the target might be moving around, which would make this ridiculously hard to do good DPS with. And fifth, firing directly at the boss may as well be a waste of ammo. The damage per orb against Carl dropped by around 66%, and some of them just spread out and detonated against the ground. It would be nice to maybe see Deathbringer with some kind of lock-on. Not sure how that would be implemented, but if there was a specific target you wanted to damage, maybe simply aim at them after 1 to 3 seconds of perk procs, or maybe even the target becomes highlighted. Then after firing, every orb will track it immediately from the moment they start to fall, assuming you're not too far away. The perk could be reset by simply holding down the reload button, stowing the weapon, or just time out after 30 seconds or so. Just throwing some ideas about here, but this would help a little with inconsistencies. The very nature of this weapon though means it will never be as reliable as a rocket launcher with Vorpal weapon, for example, which arguably is a good thing. It has good ad clear, so if it could also do nearly 60,000 DPS all the time, from a distance as well, don't forget, it would rarely leave the player's heavy slot, and yeah, let's be honest, it would be overpowered. Another quick note, regardless of how far the orbs fall, once that opening delay has been overcome, they'll impact at the same rate as you can fire, or in this case reload. So now one last graph where I'm taking off Deathbringer without the delay and adding 5 other rocket launchers from my previous video, those being Coduello with Frenzy, Coduello again but with Lasting Impression, Two-Tailed Fox, Eyes of Tomorrow, and Coduello with Frenzy when paired with Izanagi's Burden. Coduello with those perks was chosen as everything is new to this season. Two-Tailed Fox, as a lot of people have been talking about that since the rocket launcher buff. And of course Eyes of Tomorrow because that is also a new weapon, or at least since Beyond Light it has been. Coduello with Izanagi's has been included simply because it's extremely good. But for anyone who hasn't read the latest twab from Bungie, the Frenzy perk is getting nerfed, with damage being reduced from 20% to 15%. If anyone would like to see the graph with different rocket launchers tested though and some of the others, let me know, and when I eventually create a Discord, I'll share everything in that with updated numbers after the start of Season 14. So let's take a look at what we have now. Apologies if it's a little cluttered. Coduello with Frenzy paired with Izanagi's Burden, the clear winner. It's ahead of everything pretty much all the time and by a significant margin. If you want to see more details of this combination as well as the new examples in this graph, have a look at my first rocket launcher video. There's a link in the description down below. Now Deathbringer is the clear single weapon winner after 15 seconds, but with absolutely no damage at all until just over 5 seconds. This is also assuming that you can be consistent with it, so no orbs going off and doing their own thing, tracking ads, and with an equal fall distance each time, and therefore the same damage every time. Not particularly easy or practical to achieve. Eyes of Tomorrow was bugged and has now been fixed, with new damage numbers against Carl coming in at 19,385 per mini rocket, up from 13,563. That's 116,310 per round, so with 8 rounds, total damage is now 930,480. Timings are the same of course, so DPS is now 35,610. Now, I don't think this is too bad. It's good for ad clear, so shouldn't be anything too special for DPS. Although with it being an exotic, I would like to see a little more damage. At least now though, it can compete with most other rocket launchers and has the 3rd highest total damage on the graph. Two-Tailed Fox with barely average DPS but the 4th highest total damage, and more than capable of staying with the main pack of weapons for the entire time they're firing before they run out of ammo. Overall though, Cold Duello with Frenzy probably being the best choice for single weapon DPS up to just under 15 seconds, and it's not even an exotic. I understand it's not always possible to have Frenzy procced, but it's still way more reliable and consistent than doing DPS with Deathbringer. Enjoy it while you can though, as like I've already said, the perk is getting nerfed, which I couldn't disagree with any more than I do right now. Speaking of nerfs, well, this comment didn't age very well. So apologies for the graph being so cluttered. I know it's probably difficult to see if you're watching on a small screen, but I can't really show it any other way while keeping all lines distinguishable from one another. Once again, a huge thank you goes out to Triple Moon Panda for helping me out with the footage for Royal Entry and Sleepless. And on that note, it's all from me. I hope you enjoyed the video and found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe and give me any feedback down below. I appreciate every single comment. As always, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.